Hello, everyone. I'm Kenshin. Welcome to History Talks. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends. Also, remember to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. Today's historical discussion is about the Siege of Kiev during World War II. Despite over 2 years of fighting, the progress of the German forces attacking Ukraine has been slow. There are many indications that both sides are heavily investing troops in eastern Ukraine. If Ukraine loses control of this area, not only will it suffer significant political losses, but even Crimea will be at risk. It's anticipated that Russia will launch a large-scale offensive in the summer of 2024. If a full-scale war erupts, I believe it will resemble the Siege of Kiev during World War II. First and foremost, let's delve into the historical context. Adolf Hitler, who never abandoned the idea of invading the Soviet Union, expressed in his book Mein Kampf that the German people must pursue what he called living space, meaning land and resources, which he believed could be found in Eastern Europe. The Nazis went to extremes, advocating for the killing, expulsion, or enslavement of Russians and other Slavic peoples, whom they considered inferior. In this backdrop, even though the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, also known as the Soviet-German Non-Aggression Pact, was signed in 1939, Hitler viewed it as disposable at any time. As we all know, after achieving significant victories in Western Europe and facing setbacks in pressuring the United Kingdom, Hitler redirected his focus to continental Europe. He viewed the Soviet Union as weak and believed that it would collapse once German tanks rolled in. Thus, he initiated Operation Barbarossa, named after the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I, also known as Frederick Barbarossa, who drowned during the Third Crusade. Using this name seemed rather ominous. After tearing up the agreement, the German army benefited from lightning tank operations. Successful results were achieved on the northern and central fronts. However, there was an issue in the south. Despite winning the Battle of Uman, many Soviet Red Army forces lost their mobility under Marshal Semyon Budyonny's command, stationed near Kiev. This posed little threat to the German forces and was largely ignored. By late August, Nazi Germany faced a choice: whether to continue the relentless attack on Moscow or to deal with the Soviet southern front near Kiev. Opting for the latter, the lack of surrounding and annihilating capabilities by the Southern Group Army necessitated support from the Central Group Army. Hitler recalled Guderian, initially inclined to advance on Moscow, but ultimately rejected the idea. His decision was to secure the safety of the Soviet Union's western, northern, and southern regions, rendering the Moscow issue largely irrelevant. The encirclement opportunity of the Soviet troops was considered an unexpected opportunity, a relaxation of the failure to trap the Soviet troops in the south in the past. Thus, the Siege of Kiev was decided upon, with the 2nd Panzer Army and the German 2nd Army mobilized for support and planned to launch an attack east of Kiev after the rendezvous. The Nazi Germany armored forces, possessing absolute maneuverability superiority, launched a sudden attack, catching Marshal Semyon Budyonny off guard. Consequently, he was relieved of duty by Stalin in Moscow. With no successor in command, the Red Army units were left to fend for themselves, constituting the worst-case scenario on the battlefield. In this situation, on September 16, the 1st Panzer Group of Nazi Germany and the 24th Panzer Army of Heinz Guderian met east of Kiev, 120 kilometers away, to conduct encirclement warfare. As early as August 22, upon learning of the German crossing of the Dnieper River, Kiev immediately faced encirclement threats. At that time, the Southwest Front headquarters urged the High Command to allow troops to withdraw from Kiev. Even Boris Shaposhnikov, the chief of the General Staff of the Red Army, wrote to the Southwest Front on September 17, authorizing the order to withdraw from Kiev. However, the German forces had already completed the encirclement in the Lovitsa area of Poltava. However, the Soviet Red Army never imagined the extent of the encirclement, making it impossible to break out without sufficient vehicles. Moreover, the situation worsened as the German 17th Army and 6th Army, along with the Central Group Army, continuously tightened the encirclement under the cover of armored units, almost like being trapped in a pocket waiting to be slaughtered. Faced with such almost hopeless circumstances, the Red Army did not choose to surrender or give up. Instead, they actively fought back. However, under Guderian's tank units, the Soviet Red Army faced the plight of being bombarded by cannons, tanks, and aircraft. By the 19th, Kiev was already considered fallen, but the German encirclement battle continued. After 10 days of intense fighting, the last remaining Soviet Red Army forces east of Kiev chose to surrender on the 26th. At that time, almost the entire armies of the Soviet 5th, 21 Stone, 26th, 37th, and 38th armies were annihilated. Germany claimed to have captured 600,000 Red Army soldiers, later claiming up to 665,000, although this number is still staggering, including a large number of civilians suspected of evading capture. However, there were still Red Army troops who managed to escape after the German encirclement. This included Marshal Semyon Budyonny and political commissar Nikita Khrushchev, despite their dismissal. Nonetheless, this marked an unprecedented defeat for the Soviets, surpassing the catastrophic losses in Minsk from June to July. After the German occupation of Kiev, a series of Soviet radio landmines exploded, causing casualties among German soldiers and local civilians. Yet, the victory in the Battle of Kiev was relatively insignificant. Guderian's support enabled the Wehrmacht to destroy the entire southwestern front east of Kiev in September, resulting in nearly 705,544 casualties for the Red Army. However, west of Moscow, Soviet forces seized the opportunity to launch multiple attacks against the Central Group Army, even achieving victory in Yelnya offensive, leading to the first major failure for the German army in Operation Barbarossa. How should we evaluate the Battle of Kiev? Post-World War II, German commanders argued that if the Kiev military operation had been delayed, and if Operation Typhoon had been launched in September instead of October, German forces could have reached and occupied Moscow before winter. Is this argument credible? Historian David Glantz suggests that had Operation Typhoon started in September, the German offensive east of Smolensk would have encountered stronger resistance. Regardless of where the German army would have ended up by winter's arrival, they would still have faced the Soviet army's consolidation by year-end, along with 10 reserve units better equipped from Kiev. Glantz concludes that without capturing Kiev first, Nazi Germany would have faced disastrous repercussions. The retreat to the left bank of the Dnieper River this time caused Russia to lose a lot of face politically. Not only were the Ukrainian people extremely excited, even raising their national flag to celebrate on the streets, but there were also reports of Russian troops looting the local museum in Kherson, taking away 15,000 exhibits, and even dismantling toilets in people's homes. Ukrainian President Zelensky strongly criticized the Russian military for damaging important local infrastructure, and on the 14th day, he even led the singing of the national anthem in front of the Kherson City Hall. And that's not all. Everyone remembers the controversial political theorist Dugin, previously dubbed Putin's Rasputin, who quoted a story from James Fraser's The Golden Bough: a king was killed by disembowelment because he failed to bring rain during a drought. The post further mentions that the people grant rulers absolute power and expect him to save everyone. Otherwise, rulers will suffer the same fate as the Rain King. In other words, there are calls to overthrow Putin, even suggesting his execution, with even his own people turning against him.